Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, a podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. And now your host, David Ginsburg.
Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, the podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. Today's guest is a longtime friend of mine. We've known each other back in the days of a website called LiveJournal, which I don't think a lot of people use anymore, but it is still around, mostly dominated, I believe, by Russians. We both fell into the Buffy the Vampire Slayer fandom together, and I think that's how we became friends initially, but we do overlap on a lot more. Please welcome New Yorker fandom aficionado Rebecca Parker.
Hi, thank you for having me. And yeah, LJ is still around. I'm still on it. Not many other people are, but yes, it's mostly Russians now.
That's because it was bought by the Russian consortium.
Yes, I'm just desperately clinging on to it because it's that last tendril of the old fandom world I used to be a part of, especially with Buffy.
That was one of the big gateways for me meeting a lot of the people that I still talk to today, as far as friendships that started with like Harry Potter or Buffy or even things like Survivor, is being on LiveJournal, which back in our days, it was definitely a outlet for a lot of people before Facebook, really.
Yeah, I mean, LJ LiveJournal. It was great back in the day, and I'm older probably than most of your guests, I'm guessing. But it was definitely kind of the place to be for fandom. A lot of the fanfic and the icons and just the discussion was going on there, and that's kind of died, unfortunately. And it's kind of just migrated to other social media sites. But I even remember being friends with people on AOL chat message boards, the AOL Scooby Gang. It used to be my old group of friends from way, way back when. So I feel like a dinosaur.
You're going way back.
Yes, way back to the AOL message boards.
Yes, because see, I can go back from AOL to Prodigy message boards, which is where I got interested in things like Dungeons and Dragons and Star Trek initially, was through that, and then through some friends. But I know from Prodigy, I jumped onto AOL because it was the slicker looking interface, and a lot of people are using it, and then it just kind of blew up from there, as far as like all the internet kind of just started expanding like the Big Bang.
Yes. Big Bang, and then a lot of things went away.
Exactly. And now here we are with a lot of people either having blogs or Facebook pages, fan pages, groups. It's a lot more accessible now than it was back then, when you're just trying to find like a group that you could join to talk about like Harry Potter or Survivor or Buffy or whatever it was.
Yeah, I mean, the accessibility of not just the fans, but the information out there. I mean, it blows my mind. I mean, I know you're the same way, but even just thinking back to when, Buffy was on, and then Tuesday nights, you couldn't call me. And my sister was like that with ER. And everyone had this show where, nobody can call them. And it's just so interesting that, from the place when I started being such a big fan person, you were very limited to the space and time in which you had access to it. And now, I could pretty much just pull up anything or talk to anyone about any of my fandoms. And it's kind of, I start to feel like one of those get off my lawn type old people that's just amazed by the new kids' technology. But I still try and be a part of it as much as possible because, I love the things that I love, and I like having access to places to talk about or dissect them. So.
Absolutely. I mean, coming from me who has kids, they're playing video games and asking me for help, and I'm like, I don't know how to help you with these games. I've never played them. I don't know how to play, whether it's like Lego Star Wars or Minecraft, and they're watching these YouTube videos about Minecraft and talking to me, and I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, and I love you so much, so I'm going to listen, but I don't understand what you're talking to me about.
I mean, I've never really been a gamer. I know when I was younger, I remember getting Super Nintendo, and I played Super Mario Brothers, and I played one day I beat it 8 times in a row, and it was Mother's Day, and we had to go out, and I was really disappointed. But the level that some of these games, especially the ones for kids, are at, they're so complex. I don't get it. I just kind of want Pong or like Pitfall or Frogger, where it's very simple. But they ask a lot of the kids, but they seem to be up to it, so good for them.
That's right. So, normally we start off with asking the guest because you are a listener every week.
Yes, love the show.
Uh, and I normally start off by asking, like, what is fandom? How would you describe it? And we've really kind of hit that with, our talk about our old stomping grounds and what we kind of seeked out or sought out because, hey, you're an English teacher, I better get my language correct here.
Yes, I will try and
My
bite my
grammar.
tongue on any grammatical errors. And of course, forever doom myself if I make any.
So, you sent me a list. I send out a pre-questionnaire for all my guests. I admit it, it's something that I do. And you sent back a list of like 100 different fandoms. So I would like you to vote some of them off the island, and let's start talking about. You pick something off the top of your head. Where do you want to go first? What verse
Well,
do you want to hit?
it's interesting because the thing with my list, which is crazy, is that because I'm not someone who's so deep into like one fandom anymore, where I'm not a cosplayer, I don't really make graphics, I don't write fanfic, I'm just like kind of an observer. That it's almost like every fandom is my thing, and that's why it's really hard when you ask me to make a list of fandoms to just kind of narrow it down. But I will say that throughout my life, my fandom life, I've always glomped onto two people. That's the shows by Joss Whedon and the shows by JJ Abrams. I tend to follow them fairly religiously to a point. So I guess we could start there. Take your pick.
Okay.
I'll leave it to you.
Let's start off with we'll go with JJ
Okay,
first.
great.
So your first JJ Abrams show is
Felicity, which is one of my favorite shows of all time. I know you don't watch it, it's a shame. It's such a good show.
listen, I'm going to break in just for a second.
Sure.
I came very close to watching it for one reason, and that is because the old school Pink Power Ranger Amy Jo Johnson was
Yes.
on it, but I never watched it.
Yeah, she was not one of my favorite characters, but they did do this very funny meta fourth wall thing where they had her not she didn't dress up as the Pink Ranger, but she was at a Halloween party and somebody else was, so it was a very haha moment where they were
Right?
acknowledging that. It was just such a great show. I mean, I wasn't really aware of JJ Abrams as a person at that time, but I just loved it, and I guess that romantic foolish part of me like loves the idea of a show about a girl who just moves cross country to be with her high school crush. It's kind of parallels if you've ever watched Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, which is another show I just recently got into, where you kind of like you watch these people and you just face palm so much. You have this so much secondhand embarrassment for the things that they do for these guys who maybe are not worth it. And both shows kind of parallel because they also have this secondary character who's kind of like the good guy, and you kind of want to root for him. And I love, again, this is the teenage part of me that's always going to be there. I love things with love triangles, and that had one of the most classic love triangles ever, which was who is she going to go with at the end of season one, Ben or Noel? They had this moment where she's getting in the cab to go somewhere, and you don't know who she's going to, and they don't pick it up until the next season. And that was one of those cliffhangers that everyone was talking about all summer. Everyone had an opinion on, and it was just great. And that was my real introduction into JJ Abrams. And after that, Alias came next.
Which
Um,
I have watched. I watched the whole thing.
yes,
Yay!
and
If I didn't watch Felicity, I watched this.
I did not. I stopped watching, and honestly, I'm kind of like sad that I did, and I have not gone back and finished it, although I know it happens. And I'm usually not this type of person because I can tell you when people watch a show and somebody's been killed off and they go, "Well, I'm not watching anymore." It kind of annoys me because I'm like, "Why were you just watching the show for one character?" But that's
Right?
exactly what I did for Alias because when they killed off Vaughn, although he later, spoiler alert, was revealed to be alive, I was just kind of checked out. And it wasn't so much just because of that character. I think it was at that point I felt like the show wasn't the same. I know I think it was the third season where Lauren, right, was the wife was Vaughn's wife,
Right.
and a lot of people
Yep.
had issues with that. I didn't really have issues with that so much, and it's one of those really weird times where gossip starts to like seep into the show, because apparently, I think Jennifer Garner and Michael Vartan had broken up. It was very
Mm-hmm.
awkward, and I felt like it was super evident in the show. Like their scenes were so awkward. They were just there. I remember there was this one scene where they were pretending to be like a happily married couple. I don't know if you remember this, and they like were in the bathroom and they had this like kind of like reuniting kiss, and it was just no chemistry whatsoever. And I felt like at that point, with Vaughn dying after that, it just wasn't a show that felt familiar to me. And that was a shame because when I first got into it, I would stay up. I remember when I watched season one, I was like, okay, it's like 11. I'm going to watch 2 episodes. And every episode ended on a cliffhanger. Every
Yep.
episode. And I'd be up
Yep.
until like 7 a.m., like, one more episode. And I loved that. And I really felt the first 2 seasons of that show were just some of the best TV ever. Third
Do you
season,
think
but
Oh, let me stop you there.
yeah.
Do you think, with the way that the seasons are, do you think it's more that they diverted more into kind of like a supernatural plot after the first 2 seasons, rather than just sticking to the really just like bringing down SD6 and more of that kind of political assassin type of intrigue?
I never really thought of it that way because you're right. The whole Rambaldi storyline was very much, it's kind of sort of teetered that line of maybe going a little bit too far with the supernatural on what's supposed to be a realistic show. I don't think that really bothered me. I mean, at the end of season two, right? When you have that, is it the end? Yeah, when they discover ST6 and there's that total kind of like reconfiguring of the show, that didn't
Hmm.
really bother me. I liked that. I thought it was really cool that they did that because so many shows would drag that out for 5 seasons. And you'd be like, oh, why isn't this not happening already? And I love shows that take risks. And I think that was a big risk for the show. It didn't really bother me. It just felt like something was off when it came back for the 4th season. And I think that after I stopped watching, when they started bringing in, I know Amy Acker came in, which in retrospect, why that didn't bring me back. I love Amy Acker. That's that
Right, right.
Whedonverse alum thing. And Rachel Nichols and Balthazar Getty, who I had such a crush on when I was younger from Lord of the Flies. I don't know why I never got back into it. I think it was just a weird time of my life, maybe. But yeah, I mean, I think I watched some of the last episode to have some sense of closure, and maybe one day I'll go back and kind of fill in those gaps. But it was a great show. The first 2 seasons, man. I mean, that I think is what really established JJ Abrams, that he had such a strong female character that was just amazing. And I mean, Jennifer Garner, she just kicked butt. And she was on Felicity, and she was a character I hated on Felicity. So it was great that she was sort of able to flip what I knew of her. And Sydney Bristow and Papa Bristow, 2 of the most iconic characters in my mind ever on television. They're up there with like Don Draper for me.
Yeah, Sydney was one of those characters, like, you fell in love with her, and it's hard not to. Number one, because her character is so great, and number two, it's Jennifer Garner.
Yes.
I loved her, and I really think, like, not only that, they had such a strong supporting cast of characters around her, skipping Vaughn, because Vaughn is Vaughn,
He's a
and
straight
Vaughn's not.
guy.
He's the straight guy. He's not really supporting, but there is like that group of characters, like Bradley Cooper was on the
Yes.
show,
Will
and
Tippin.
I have to say, when he became popular in movies, I was like, how is he popular? He's like the crush back in Alias. Like, what
What?
is going on?
No, I was like, yes, finally the world knows about Will Tippin because I loved Will. And you will probably see a trend, and when we get to Buffy, you will definitely see this trend. But I am always the person who supports the best friend. Not always, but mostly the best friend being like the romantic suitor for the lead. Um,
Right.
so I did love. Listen, Sydney Vaughn is probably one of my OTPs of all time, but I loved the chemistry that she had with Will. So I was happy for Bradley Cooper's success. I wish more people got into Alias backwards because of it. I think there was probably too much of a gap in time for it to be really like a crossover effect. And the show was
Uh-huh.
off the air.
Oh yeah, it'd been off the air for a while before, like when he like started really breaking out. with The Hangover,
Yes.
right? That was really where he started getting those roles, and after that, he just exploded. And it's just when you go back and look at it, and you're like, that's the guy I watched on Alias, and now he's like this mega star, and it's mind blowing at times.
Yeah.
But
And he was in a
oh,
show called Kitchen Confidential.
which I
Yeah,
watched.
when that first came on, it was right after Buffy had ended, and I was like, okay, do I watch Xander's show or do I watch Willow? I watch Nicholas Brendan or Allison Hannigan. So it was either Kitchen Confidential or How I Met Your Mother. I think they were on at the same time, and this was before DVRs. So I went with How I Met Your Mother. But
Right.
I'd seen the pilot of Kitchen Confidential, and he had that charisma. And you
Yeah.
can kind of see the blueprint for how he would become this megastar. But I mean, he's just always going to be kind of Will Tippin to me. And you're right. Going back to Alias, there was so much of a strong structure. I mean, even like a character like Weiss. I mean, I love
Yes.
Grunny, Greg Grunberg, who's pretty much in every JJ Abrams thing. But he was just such a kind of like this really fun kind of best friend comic foil type character, and the Spy Family. I mean, it really was a great show. I'm sorry that I feel like it really declined in quality, and I cannot really speak for the last season and a half because I gave up on it. But from what I have heard, it didn't really recover as much to the earlier quality. Did you find that?
I did find that they kind of went off in a direction where it wasn't hard to watch. Like obviously the first two seasons are fantastic. The third season, again, I mean they're still doing all the work of like having that spy drama, but as they integrated the Rambaldi storyline further and further into the show, it really did start departing from its roots, which I mean, shows do that, but and obviously they were taking the risks with what they were doing. I was happy to see it, and the ending is really good. I liked the ending, and obviously, like there's the characters that you just love, even the villains in the show.
Mm.
You're like you appreciate who they are and how they act and everything that they are doing because without them, there's no
Yeah,
show.
I mean, there you have the complexity of the villains, which is great, because you never really want them to go away. Because they're gonna make things more interesting, like Sloane, right?
Yeah.
He was such a great complex character. Like you saw the variations in him. Sometimes I feel like shows go a little too all the way evil, and then you're just like, okay, yeah, get rid of him next season. And he's the type of character who he creates such drama for the action. You don't really want it to go away. So I think when it was hitting on its cylinders, one of the best shows ever.
And definitely recommend it. I don't know if it's out there anywhere for streaming. I don't think it's on Netflix, which is the main streaming site I use, but
Yeah,
I mean, I could be wrong if it's not on Amazon Prime or Hulu or
I'm
somewhere
not sure. I
else.
know ABC just came out with an announcement that they were putting a lot of their older shows on their app, I believe. I'm not sure if that is going to be one of them, but I know a lot of like one-offs like Trophy Mom, which was a show I loved, which was on for one season, are back. I think Felicity is back on there, but I have not really looked too much into it because I don't have time for all this TV. My goodness, I watch a lot, too much.
There's always time for TV. You just got to schedule your life better.
Yeah, exactly. That's why the summers are good. I sit like a bump on a log and watch television all day long.
I don't see any issue with that.
Yeah, it's nice. And, I'm not complaining, but sometimes I feel like, oh, I haven't seen the sun in, a while. Maybe I should go outside. But
The sun is overrated. It's too
I
hot
know I need
out.
my vitamin D for like 5 minutes though. So
Oh, well, I mean, go get some food or
yeah,
something and then get back in there.
But
Okay, so we have Alias, which, and I'm going to bring up the point before we hit the next show,
yeah.
is that because you jarred my memory with Sloane, the villain Sloane of Alias reminds me so much of a certain character on another JJ verse show, Lost,
Mm.
and I didn't even make the connection until just now how similar they are. Is that Sloane reminds me a lot, or Ben
I knew you
from
were going there.
yeah, Benjamin Linus reminds me a lot of Sloane.
Yeah, I mean, Lost is always going to have such a special place in my heart. It's one of my favorite shows of all time. Definitely top five. Probably on going to be on that list forever. I can't imagine it going off. But I loved Lost. I mean, it was just, I remember the night it premiered. I posted on LiveJournal and I was like, hey guys, check out this show. Look, Dominic Monaghan from Lord of the Rings is in it. And, I was just Emily DeRaven from Roswell, although, she wasn't the most popular character there. I remember it just being such a thing where the fandom came together. Like, I remember getting people into the show. I remember watching the pilot and just being like, holy poop, like, this is amazing. This show is just, it just felt like it reinvented the genre. I mean, I know a lot of people have an issue with the ending, which I know I'm kind of skipping to the end here. I didn't. I mean, I loved the ending. I thought that was one of my favorite finales because that show is about the characters. I didn't really watch that show to be like, why was the polar bear there? I mean, it was cool and all, and I kind of wanted, and I think those answers are there in the show. They're just not, I didn't want to watch the finale where the last episode was like, and here's where we explain to you all that weird shit we brought up.
Right.
So I know a lot of people felt like it was a cheat, the last episode, that it was so character driven. I loved it. And that's because that character, that show, you learn so much about the characters through the flashbacks and the flash forwards and the stuff in the present. It was all about those characters to me. And I mean, that had such a great cast. There were really very few weak links, character-wise in that cast. Every episode you weren't like, oh, all right, it's a this episode. There were definitely some. I don't think the Jack episodes were very interesting typically. Which is odd because he's the main character, but again, he's sort of like that straight guy role where it's not going to be too exciting because he's the straight guy role.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I loved that show. And Ben, yeah, great villain. Totally see the humanity in him. I love that they kind of reformed him at the end.
Right.
Because I think he was just kind of he was manipulated a bit. And he had that humanity. I still want to go back and watch it again. And this is the problem I run into. Like, I really want to rewatch all my favorite old shows, but there's so many new shows to get into that I find it hard to do the rewatches and the rereads.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But Michael Emerson, right? Amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't follow Person of Interest because I'm not really big into procedurals. But that was, again, iconic character, Ben Linus. Love him.
There's so much to talk about Lost as far as the characters and the story. I mean, we could spend a whole episode just talking about Lost.
Absolutely.
But I will ask you, who is your favorite character on Lost?
I gotta say Hurley. I mean, he was just...
Yay!
He's amazing. He's like the character that represents the audience. And I always love that funny guy. I mean, he's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I love them all. I love Juliet. I mean, I think she was such a fascinating character that wasn't there from the beginning. And Sawyer's so complex and like layered. But Hurley, man, I mean, you would just get happy when he was on scene. You really would.
And he did things just out of the ordinary. I mean, here he is. He's making a golf course, or he's fixing up the van. I mean,
listening to music.
He does stuff where it's just like, here are these people trying to survive, and Hurley's the one that's trying to think of, well, how can we keep these people entertained, or keep their mind off of things, because there's polar bears out there, and there's like the smoke monster, and there's others and everything else, and he just adds so much. Like, he's that fun guy.
Yeah, and I think you have to remember too that there's so much more to survival than the body stuff. There's that mental stuff where if you don't have a character like him, things get so grim. He brings that levity to it where you just kind of like, things are going to be okay. Like, maybe we're stuck on this island, but there's a sense of community, and he's so much at the center of that. And, maybe that's reading so much into it where he was so key to the survival of the characters. But, you need a character and you need a person to kind of maintain that lighter side and show you the hope. And that was him. And he was hilarious. I mean, the writing for him was so great. The episodes where he was trying to, with the 70s, when he was trying to like answer, I think it was, Miles, right? Where he was trying to answer the questions with him. And it was just kind of hilarious that he could not remember history, and he makes all these Star Wars references. I mean, he's like all of us. He is like the fandom representative on that show.
It was interesting because I had actually watched the first episode recently. I had pulled it up because I was doing something about Lost, and I wanted to just get that first show in and see it again. And it's so different. Like you have the visuals of the everything that's gone on in the season or the series, and you go back to that first episode, and it's just like, oh my gosh, there's this guy and there's that guy, and they're totally different from how they act now and or had acted or started to act in their character progressions, and just seeing them as their original like starting point zero characters was just really really interesting to just see that.
Yeah, I mean, the characters in the show are so dynamic. And I mean, you look back at the pilot and you're like, oh, look, there's Paolo and Nikki. Just kidding. The two most like hated characters ever that the show is like, yeah, no, let's undo that. But no, I mean, you're looking, it's just one of those shows where the characters change so much. And that's why it's just all about the characters for me. I didn't need like a download of boring answers to all the show's mysteries. The great thing about mystery is sometimes when they're not answered and you kind of have to fill in your own answers. And I feel really bad for Damon Lindelof because he got so much guff on Twitter that I think he eventually deleted his account, although I think he's back. He gets so much hatred for Lost and the ending. And I just feel like, yeah, you guys are missing the point. And I don't mean to be dismissive of people who have different opinions. I just think maybe that they went into the show with different expectations than I did. But I don't know. Twitter, I go on it, but there's so much hatred on there, and he got so much of it directed towards him, and I really thought it was a shame. It's just a show at the end of the day, as much as that hurts me to say it, because it's, you know, these shows are so much more to me, but I try not to ever be hateful, even if I disagree with things, because there are things that I don't like in my fandoms, but I would never like go on Twitter and hate, you know, send so much hate towards the showrunners like Julie Plec, who's the showrunner for the Vampire Diaries and the originals. If you ever
Hmm.
go on her feed and see the replies to her, they're horrible, horrible because she doesn't go with the ship that they like. And I think that's the wrong side of fandom. I mean, that's obviously fandom too. It's like the dark side. Don't go there.
Right.
You know.
That's and I know we had discussed that, or I had discussed that with Chelsea on her episode 6, where she was talking about the supernatural fandom and how
Yes.
rabid they get. And being I've not watched Supernatural except for a few episodes, and I'm not really in it anymore as far as looking at people's Twitters or going on to see comments. Like I'm to the point now where the comment section is not where I go, and if I'm following someone on Twitter, but I'm not checking out their replies because it's just too much at this point with the amount of stuff that's going on. I mean, it to me back in our day, or even before that, like pre-Twitter, pre-Facebook, pre-social media, it wasn't like that, I don't think. But again, I mean, the reach wasn't there for people to just be like, "Oh, let me tell you how much I hated your episode today."
Yeah, die in a
Like,
fire, like the things they say.
right.
And
Like it was more about saving shows and sending like bottles of Tabasco
oh
to somebody,
yes.
or like mini footballs. That's like how the fandom really rallied around. It wasn't this whole I'm going to tell you how much you suck every day for like the next 6
Yeah,
years.
I mean, and it's such a turnoff for someone in the fandom. Like I used to watch Supernatural. I gave up on it, I don't know, maybe around season 6 or something. Not so much because of the fandom, just because that show's gone on so long. It takes a lot of commitment to go that long. And if you don't really like adore a show, sometimes it just starts to just be easy to fall behind. But
Right.
go thinking of going back into that fandom, like they're very there's a lot of great people in that fandom, but there are a lot of scary people too. And I don't really interact so much more than message boards at this point and talking with my friends, you know. But it's kind of a detriment to the fandom, and I don't think people realize that. And this is the teacher part of me, which I really lament for my kids. But social media has just this anonymity that allows people to be so hateful and just really have no repercussions for it. And I don't know if you saw on the news with Leslie Jones from Ghostbusters.
I did.
She got so, I mean, if you read the stuff on her feed, I mean, I did. It was just, if it was me, I would have crawled in a hole and never come out. And most celebrities are just like, oh, whatever, and they don't pay attention to it. But she was kind of fighting back with it. And like her last tweet that one night was like, I'm leaving in tears. And it's just what is wrong with you that, like, I don't understand. I'm just one of those like hippy dippy people, like love everyone, but why do have people have so much hate? And that's a real person. You may not think they're a real person, but they are. And I saw that with, I think Lost was the first time I really noticed the ugliness of fandom. I mean, I've seen a little bit, like I know Harry Potter, the whole, if you're Harry Hermione versus Harry Ron, that was a big war apparently
Yep.
between
Yep.
people. Did I say Harry Ron? I meant Hermione Ron. I'm sure Harry Ron fans have their own opinion too, but I don't know. I think social media, as much as it has been wonderful for fandom, has also kind of bred this uglier side, which turns me off to a degree. I mean, I love one of the shows I love now, which is The 100. They had some controversy this year. I don't know if you're familiar with it at all.
I am familiar with it. I don't watch the show, but I have friends that watch it that were really upset.
Yeah, and I totally see both sides of it. I'm someone, and it's probably not my place to say because I'm a heterosexual person, and this is something that was really, it was, about the representation of the LGBT community and the whole bury your gays trope, which was kind of started with Buffy, with Tara and Willow.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand the feedback and the need to educate the showrunners and to kind of put things right, but it just turned so ugly. And I don't think it was the best way to go across it. And it sort of sours me on the fandom a little bit because I think at a certain point, you have to kind of let it go and hope that they're going to correct things. But The 100 is also a show where they basically do not acknowledge different types of sexuality. You're just whatever. If you like a boy, you like a boy. You like a girl, you like a girl. You like both, fine. There's no labels. It's just you are what you are. And I think at the core, that's this really great message from the show. And I think they do a lot for that community. But that was it was definitely a thing that needed to be discussed. And it's definitely kind of a disturbing trope. But the feedback and the interaction between the fans and the showrunners gets a little bit too ugly for me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I really feel like Lost was kind of one of the first places that
Oh,
went.
definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, that was at the advent of everything, as far as I think it was around when either MySpace was out or even the start of Facebook. I don't remember if Twitter was around during it, but I remember like every time there'd be an episode, there would always be posts or comments about, oh, why aren't they doing this? How come they're not doing this? They need to do X, Y, and Z. And it's like, just enjoy the show or really get off the boat and go find something else to do.
Yeah, and with Twitter, I don't remember when Twitter started. I feel like it's just always been there. It's strange, but there's also a lot of the cast and the creators interacting on social media, on Twitter especially, and that's a form of promotion for their show. So they do it to try and get more fans, but it opens themselves up to that anonymity, which bites them in the butt, where people just say horrible things like "you should die" or "you're a fat horrible biatch," the things that they
Yeah.
say. I mean, I'm just, if I can't sleep, I'll go on and I'll just sort of, I don't know why. My theory in life should be never read the comments, but especially with, I would go back and sort of like talk back to some of the people who are being so hateful, and there's no point to it, and it's really something I do when I can't sleep. But especially with Julie Plec, not that I love the Vampire Diaries and the originals, more so the latter than the former at this point. And not that I think they're excellent TV shows. They're fun. They're okay. But she gets such hate, and I think it's because she's a woman and she's not a typically beautiful, fit woman, that she gets a lot of hate, and I just don't like it. But again, that's the part of me that's like, love everything, love everyone, and I just don't get the point of being horrible to a real person at all.
Right.
But yeah, that's me.
That's you. And we have diverged a little bit.
That's I'm
Just
divergent.
a scotch, but that's okay. That's okay. So, as let's talk about the ending of Lost. You said you are on the camp of that you love it because it doesn't need to answer the questions. It is what it is, and here you have gotten this great story.
Yeah, and I really love. Is it kind of cheesy where they all wind up in the room, when they kind of sort of pass on together? Yes. I'll admit it. It's kind of cheesy. I don't care. I love it anyway. It felt like right for those characters to see them all together and to know that this community that they formed, and I'm getting goosebumps, the community that they formed was so important to them that that's the place they all come back to. I loved it. And I do see the criticism. I don't see the criticism where people hate it, but I see the basic criticism because I understand what I love. I could see how other people wouldn't. I just feel like it's every time there's always these conversations about the worst finales of all time. And there's always like Dexter, totally horrible. How I Met Your Mother, abysmal. And then
Oh
Lost
yeah.
comes up, and I'm like, but no, I mean, it's wonderful, and I can get how people don't like it, but it's just so divisive. I feel like you either love it or you hate it, and I'm completely in the love it camp.
I ran across a theory for the ending, because it's really at the season, the whole end of that series, the last season, is really Hurley starting to bring people back together.
Yes.
Like that's his role. I mean, he also at the end of the show, like in the real world of Lost, he becomes the caretaker of the island, and he's the one that's charged with going around and settling affairs and all that. One of the thoughts that I don't know if I read it on Entertainment Weekly, because they had their guy doing those really in-depth reviews, or if I stumbled across it somewhere else, but that at the end of the series, with Hurley asking Ben, hey, why don't you come in? And Ben's like, oh no, I'm going to stay out here. I've got more work to do. That it was going to be like, if there was a spin-off, or not a spin-off, but like additional stuff going on, that Ben was going to round up those people that weren't there at the church, such as like Anna Lucia, and so those other characters, the ones that you didn't see, the morally, like maybe like the grayer characters, or the ones that weren't there, and that Ben was going to round those people up at some point when they were ready to move them on to the next life.
I have not heard that. That's interesting. I love Anna Lucia, by the way. Another character that I tend to sometimes love the characters that people hate. And I thought she was so interesting, and I was really bummed by the response that she got. But I've never heard that theory, but I would like that. I mean, again, I so want to sit down and watch it all. Also because every time I watch a new show and I go, oh, who's this actor? And like, oh, they were on Lost in this one episode. And to go back and see some of the side characters that are people that I know now. Like I know Holland Roden, who was on Teen Wolf, although I stopped watching that, played I think Ben's mother, who gave birth to him. So like all these little roles where you never really notice them, but now you'll be
Right.
like, oh right, that's Holland Roden. Yeah, I mean that there's just so many characters in that show that just are just side characters, and you love them and you're interested in them, and it would be great to see them again. It's all about the characters for me.
It is. And I think that's what JJ Abrams does with his shows, is definitely he's always got that solid group of characters, whether it's, 5 or 6 characters in Alias, or like 500 characters in Lost. You've got that group of characters. Now, there's another Abrams show that I've not watched, but you have.
Okay.
And that has my favorite Mighty Duck, Joshua Jackson, aka Pacey.
Oh yes.
From what my wife calls Dawson's River Kids.
Pacey's Pond, alternate title, should have been, because Pacey was just so much more interesting than Dawson. So glad he got the girl in the end. But yes, Fringe, which was kind of such a wonderful show. I have the box set. I want to go back one day and watch it again. But it's like an X-Files type show with supernatural and alternate dimensions and universes, and just such a great show. Again, dynamic characters. I mean, the main character, Olivia Dunham. I'm marrying Peter and her in my head. Olivia Dunham, from the beginning of the series, she was very flat. When it first started, the actress Anna Torv, a lot of people were like, oh, I don't know about this show. This character is just very flat. And I think a lot of times that's how they're supposed to be, and it's a criticism of the acting. I noticed the same thing with Stephen Amell in Arrow season 1, very flat at the beginning, but they're supposed to be flat to show the change. She was a character, if you watch the pilot and you watch the last episode, Olivia, so much change in her. She really just became someone that Fandom really wasn't sure of in the beginning. They were like, I don't know about this actress. To the end, like she was playing multiple versions of her character. And she was so good that you'd almost forget that it was her, like both her and alternate universe Olivia in the same scene. And you're kind of like, oh, right. It's the same person acting like green screen or double, whatever. Now Orphan Black, which I don't know if you know watch that does the same thing. But it's that where you just don't, you're watching something and it's so good, you don't realize that it's the same person twice. And she was that. And one of the best characters on television was Walter Bishop, played by John Noble, who's in Lord of the Rings, and he was on Sleepy Hollow, which is another show. But he was just kind of this character where he was kind of crazy, wacky, always eating red vines, and he had a cow in the lab, and but just very, you have to watch it. I mean, it's such a great show, and if you like the X-Files or anything supernatural and alternate universe type stuff, it's just really, really fascinating, and it got really complex the longer it went on. I mean, I came to the point where I was like, okay, and I think I'm like this with The Walking Dead now. Fringe is on, let's not eat for an hour, because it would just gross you out in so many different ways, all these different supernatural things that would be going on. I don't think it really got its due. I think it was only 4 seasons, so I don't think it's really talked about so much anymore. And Joshua Jackson was great on it. Yes, Pacey, forever Pacey, sadly. But it's definitely one of the most interesting science fiction shows that I've seen. And I really miss it. I'm going to rewatch it someday when I'm retired and have all the time in the world. But yeah, I mean, I if you dug the X-Files and if you like that type of thing, I would definitely recommend trying that. I don't think it's so long where it's, oh, you have to get into 10, like Supernatural, 12 seasons of it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the problem with Supernatural.
Yeah, that's the problem with when shows go over, I would say 6 seasons, you start to question whether you're ever going to get into it or keep with it. So
Well, I'll have to check out Fringe. It's one of those shows that I know it was on my radar for the longest time, and I think partly it's your fault for it being on my radar.
Okay.
Besides Joshua Jackson,
I think you were going to say my fault for you not watching it. I was like, that's
no,
cruel.
it's my fault for it being, or your fault for being on the radar because you always talked about it. But um, I don't know why I didn't watch it. Either maybe there's something else going on. I know there's probably when I was in college at the time and trying to be, a good student and not, well, I wasn't that great of a
I don't
student.
know. Was it
And
that long ago?
it was that long ago.
Was it?
It had to have been. See,
Oh.
now I'm gonna have to look it up right now while we're talking. To the Wikipedia.
To the Wikipedia. I usually go right to
Okay.
IMDb.
Fringe Wikipedia says it started in 2008. So no, I was definitely out of college at that point. Right? Yeah, yeah, I was definitely out of college. Oh, I had moved from Japan back to here. So, no, I was here. Why wasn't I watching it? I don't
You have
know.
no reason. You should be ashamed of yourself.
Yes, I have no reason. I'm ashamed of myself. I'll have to see if it's somewhere out there to follow it up. Oh, it was moved into the Friday night death slot. That's
That's usually
happened
where
too.
all my favorite shows go. But I'm at least hopeful now that Friday night is starting to turn around. They start to put better things on Friday, and they understand. Like this season, this past season, they put the Vampire Diaries and the originals back to back on Friday, and the ratings were not affected because I think that they know that the shows that have that core following will go with the show no matter what. And if they're not getting great ratings on Thursday night, okay, it's not so bad on Friday, the same numbers. So Friday night's starting to make a comeback, which I'm glad about because I'm a geek and never go out on the weekends. So it's always great when I'm like, oh, it's Friday. There's actually something for me to watch. So I don't think it's so much the death slot anymore, although I think people still see it that way, but it's changed, which is nice.
So is there any more of the Fringe, or not Fringe, but of the JJ verse that we have yet to explore?
The major thing in the JJ verse, I mean, it's kind of like it's crazy that Star Wars is sort of now in that umbrella of the JJ verse. Although I don't, it's funny. I'm gonna say I don't really consider it like a JJ verse thing because it's got its own universe. However, I'm about to say that the new Star Trek movies are, and I think that's a little hypocritical because if Star Wars has its own universe, I'm completely sure that Star Trek does as well. But I've always considered the new Star Trek movies to be part of that. And I love them. I know you're a big fan of the TV shows. I have never really watched them. I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's
Um,
okay. You've got a lot of TV shows that you
but
watch.
I love the new movies. I have my ticket for the new one this week. So by the time that this airs, it will be a long time ago. But I'm very excited for the new movie, even though the reviews have not been fabulous. But I'm very much The whole Anton Yelchin dying thing still gets me, because I thought he was such a great Chekhov, from what
Mm-hmm.
I've seen of the original, because I have seen the original movie, and he just brought such enthusiasm and youth, and I don't know, I loved him, and it's really kind of a shame that he died. But I do think that JJ Abrams, hey, look, I love the lens flare. Give me all the lens flare. I know he's criticized for it. I love it. You know, I'm very forgiving. Lens flare me up. But I really think that the movies have been wonderful. I love them.
I liked the first movie, but I hated the second
Is it
one.
because of the whole Khan thing? Because I know a lot of the diehard Star Trek fans were upset that they teased the reveal and then they recast him, and then they cast him as Benedict Cumberbatch, who's very much not a person of color, and I feel like if you have a lot of that fandom expectations going into it, I could see why you wouldn't like it, but I didn't.
See, I didn't have the expectation. Like, I think part of it was I didn't have the expectation that it was going to follow the Khan story at all. Like, that wasn't anything that I was into. Like, I love Wrath of Khan. Don't get me wrong. As far as like Star Trek 2 Wrath of Khan, I love that. I'm not so much an original series watcher. I've watched them, but it's not something that really sticks out in my head. I think for me, it just really seemed to just be another action movie or another science fiction movie with action in it. And it didn't seem to me that it was really a Star Trek movie.
Okay, I can see that because I know a lot of the criticism that I heard was that, and I think that's kind of fixed for this next movie, was that Star Trek is a show about exploration, and they hadn't even explored yet, right? Is that part of the criticism that you have towards it?
Pretty like for the most part, I think it's almost like not even some of the storyline was just odd and weird, and it kind of like went into spots where you're like, what's going on? I don't really understand it. There's a lot of explosions going on. There's characters that we don't really need,
Mm.
but it just seemed more of a action movie rather than a Star Trek movie. And obviously they're bringing in a new generation of fans with these movies. I'm appreciative of that, but it was one of those movies where I watched it and I don't think I would watch it again.
I haven't watched it in a while. But again, I think it's because I don't really have that Star Trek fandom attachment outside of the movies that I'm a lot less critical. But I totally see what you mean. I mean, I don't even remember the character's name, but Alice Eve. What did she really
Yes,
contribute except for taking her shirt off for the trailers? Um,
right.
so yeah, I can see your criticism. I think it's just because I come from just taking the movies as they are versus having that fandom baggage and expectation that I just enjoyed it. But I never really thought of it that way, where it was just kind of an action movie. But I see that. I could see that. I still love it, but
Yeah, and I at this point when this show comes out, I probably will not have seen the new one.
no.
Uh, just it's because I don't have a lot of time to get away to watch movies when I want to.
Mm.
I have to plan it out very carefully if I am doing it to make sure that I can either go pick up the kids after I see the 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock show. So I'm limited on time there if I do that. And then since I work during the day, I'm taking off time from work to go see a movie.
Yeah.
But
One of the good
but
things about being single, I have no attachments whatsoever. I can go now if I want to.
I am interested to see what they are going to do with it, especially now they have the Fast and the Furious director
Yes.
at this point, and I know that the trailers have been good, but it seems more like a Fast and the Furious movie. There's a lot of action going on, and it's hard to really get a grasp of. Besides that, the Enterprise is destroyed again. Trying to figure out like what's exactly is going on, but I'll be interested to watch it when it comes out on DVD and see where it goes, especially now that they have the new Star Trek series that they're going to be launching I think it's either this year or next year on CBS and on the internet streaming at the same time to see where they're going to go with the TV show as opposed to the movie series.
Yeah, going back to the trailer for a second, I actually really like the trailer because I have no idea what the movie's about. And I do see that it seems like a very actiony thing, but sometimes I love going into a movie blind. Like I cannot remotely tell you what the plot of that movie is going to be, except for there's some weird black and white painted alien. cool badass chick. And there's, stuff that happens. And I kind of like that they leave so much mystery of the plot. But I can see how that reads as it's just an action movie. The CBS show, yeah, it's going to be on All Access. I forget when. I probably will check it out because, I'm a slave to fandom. Even though I've never watched a Star Trek show, I feel like I have to. And I was just talking to my friends about how she's upset that she has to pay $6 a month. But if you've ever seen CBS All Access, it's actually pretty cool. It has like every single episode of every single CBS show pretty much. I went back and I watched like the first episode of Survivor, which I adore. And it's so changed. It's hilarious how different it was season 1. So even though you do have to pay $6 a month for the app, I think there's a lot of content on there. But, I told her, I said, listen, if there's a new Star Trek movie, you're going to pay like $13 to go see a ticket and it's 2 hours. This is $6 for like ideally 4 episodes a month,
Right.
Not a bad deal.
Not a bad deal at all. You can't shake your fist at $6 a month. I mean, we pay what, $10 for Netflix, give or take.
I have Netflix, I have Hulu. Right now I have CBS All Access for Big Brother, don't ask. But it adds up, but at the same point, it's nice to have that accessibility of all the things I want to watch.
Absolutely. So, of the JJ verse, I think we've hit everything at this point.
Yeah, the big stuff for me. There are some shows he did I didn't really connect to, like Revolution, but I mean, for me, Lost, Felicity, Fringe, Alias, that's probably my ranking of my favorites of those. Oh, and Star Trek, but that's like, it's this whole other thing, the movies. But Lost is just going to be at the center of my heart, right plop next to Buffy for me. Never going to change.
What do you think it is that draws you to JJ Abrams? Do you find that it's more of the characters, the stories, the settings that they're in, all of the above?
I'm going to feel like a fangirl, but all of the above. I mean, really the characters are, like I said, they're just iconic, a lot of them, and really just interesting and layered and dynamic. And the actors, I think the casting was great. I don't really think there were too many actors where I feel like, not crazy about them. But yeah, I mean, just when his name is like really kind of fully attached to something, it's going to be good. Versus if his name is sort of mildly attached to it, like, produced by or executive, whatever, like Revolution. Wasn't really him. It just kind of has that connection. You can tell. And it's the same thing with Joss Whedon because, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which he kind of sort of is part of, is nowhere near the quality of his other shows, but it's still okay. And I like that I like that I have someone that I can go, oh, it's a JJ Abrams show. It's a Joss Whedon show. You're going to be invested in it because they're quality. And especially the more attached their name is versus, he stopped by on set one day to just check in. And now it's just JJ Abrams show. I just feel like the quality of what they turn out, even Super 8, which I thought was an excellent movie that he directed or he was involved with that. Really felt like E.T., Steven Spielberg type movie for me. I feel like he just does it well. And I think with what he did with Star Wars: The Force Awakens, it really cemented him as someone of worth because he just blew that out of the park for me. I mean, I just think expectations were met and surpassed, and I'm just excited for whatever he comes up with next.
And that was part 1 of the podcast episode with Rebecca Parker talking about the Abramsverse TV shows and movies. Join us in a few days for the next part 2 with Rebecca as we explore her other favorite Fandomverse, aka the Whedonverse, all things Joss Whedon. As a reminder, this podcast was recorded back in middle of June or early July before Star Trek Beyond had come out. So I hope you enjoyed the Abramsverse delve and enjoy the Whedonverse episode when it comes out. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for listening to Tales from the Fandom. Subscribe to us on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Tales from the Fandom to see photos, links, leave feedback, and check out upcoming guests. If you'd like to be a guest, email David at talesfromthefandom@gmail.com.